Today is Holocaust Memorial Day. Today, January 27th, marks 80 years exactly since the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration camp. As time passes and there are fewer and fewer survivors left to tell their stories, it is increasingly crucial that this day is used to remember and commemorate the atrocities committed by the Nazis during the Second World War and learn from that history so humanity does not repeat it. For many in the Jewish community, January 27th has also become a time to reflect on their Jewish identity and celebrate the richness and vastness of the culture and the diaspora. Here in Winnipeg, we have a strong and vibrant Jewish community, and one of the more recent additions to that community and the Winnipeg music scene in general is Canadian-Israeli singer and songwriter, artist, and author Orit Shimoni. For more than 10 years, Orit Shimoni lived with no fixed address. She had a successful career touring the world, performing everywhere from theaters to cafes to bars to folk fests to backyards and living rooms. All the while, her songs with their folksy, blues, country, and jazz influences thoroughly entertaining and engaging audiences all over the world. Then the pandemic hit. And in the middle of a cross-Canada tour, she was stopped in Winnipeg as the shutdowns took place. Since then, she has chosen to make Winnipeg her home base. While she still tours, Winnipeg has become a place where she returns to and can hang her hat. And joining me here in the Classic 107 studio to talk about her work and her Jewish identity, I am joined by Orit Shimoni. Hi, Orit. Nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're going to start things out with a tune. Can you set it up for us and tell us what we're going to hear?
Yes, with that beautiful introduction, and thank you for all of that. You know, part of me wants to just sing the song about getting stranded in Winnipeg, because that's kind of my most recent hit, and it's called Winnipeg, and I was delighted to finally have a song with a city name in it because it seemed like a cool thing to have. But knowing that there was a broader theme to this specific interview, I actually prepared a song that was, as far as I know, the first song I wrote that dealt really head on with the Holocaust and with my Jewish identity. And it was a very difficult song to write. I had moved to Berlin. I lived there for a year, and it was a country I never thought I would ever set foot in. Two of my grandparents escaped in the nick of time. I was there for the year, and I decided I'm going to write 10 songs while I'm here and have a Berlin album, and whatever comes to me will come to me, no self-censorship. But I would like there to be one song that deals with it.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do it. I had no idea how to broach it. It was so visceral and painful. And then I left Berlin, ended up in Toronto, ended up being invited to a synagogue service. I grew up very, very secular, so synagogue wasn't a thing of my upbringing, but I love music. I went, and I got really carried away with the music and the reverence, and I think that the fact that I had just spent all this time in Berlin made me appreciate the survival of this thing that was standing there. It was this old dilapidated building, and that these prayers still existed and people still sang them. So I went home that night and I wrote this song, and that's the one I'm going to share. As you can tell by my voice, I get pretty shaky doing it because there's a lot of emotion in this topic. There's an old synagogue in Toronto that I visited after Berlin. A wise old fool for a rabbi who wore simple clothes and a grin. There was a pigeon in the window, not sure if asleep or dead, and a pregnant cat in the basement who was seeking to be fed. And the rabbi kept on talking, and the good man listened well. He talked a lot of nothing. he was just an empty shell. But the words that he was quoting still meant a lot to me, about Joseph and his brothers and what traitors we can be. I sat and watched and listened, though I didn't know my place. If I was in denial or in a state of grace, well, how could it be that I belonged in a line of us or them, if that line itself is the place from where the hatred always stems? Well, the golden plaques in the Berlin streets where God's children used to live tell the tale of a fall so massive it's a struggle to forgive. But it's not the people that I'm angry with, no, it's with God above. I don't know what you call that, but I don't call it love. That old synagogue in Toronto, the building was so old, and the basement where the meal was served was drafty and was cold. But the bread was passed and the wine was shared with a genuine reverie. How it all survived given all this time is a mystery to me. And the men, they prayed so beautifully in that ancient melody. How it all survived given all these trials is a mystery to me. So rock me in your bosom and my heart will speak your name. I may not know a thing, but I remember all the same. Rock me in your bosom and my heart will speak your name. I may not know a thing, but I remember all the same.
Fantastic. Wonderful.
It's a hard one to sing just in terms of what it brings up in me. And I certainly don't perform that in any venue. It has to be the right audience.
One of the things I did when I was preparing for the interview is I was listening to your stuff, and it's safe to say I've become a fan. I love it. It's great.
Thank you.
I was also on your website, and you said that you love words. Words can contain love and change people. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. I'm definitely a language person. I think that's evident by the craft I've chosen for my life. There's almost like a mystical quality to words, and I've always been very fascinated by how they work and how they embody what we want to express, and sometimes there's room for interpretation and misinterpretation. I ended up doing a master's thesis on language and ethics.
Yeah, you have a master's in theology?
In theology, yeah. Which was a funny place to be as a secular Jewish person, but it was where I could explore the thoughts and philosophical meanderings that my mind really wanted to do at the time. But it was very much, the reason I went to theology was because I had just come from an incredibly violence-torn Jerusalem. And I thought, if people are doing this in the name of God, then and I'm not religious, but if that's their thing, then they've gotten something very wrong along the way. And I want to be able to speak within their idiom to find some common sense here that we could maybe make this a better situation. What I came to was metaphor. And I sort of proved philosophically that metaphor is the most ethical form of communication. What we can do when I show you a poem is I bring you all the meaning I intend, but I officially invite you to participate in that meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why art to me is like the absolute golden zone for making the world a better place, because it invites participation. It's inclusive by its very essence. It's authentic when it's good. So it's mine and yours. And language has this incredible magical ability to do that. So that's why it's my passion.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I was also wondering about you is, how long have you wanted to be a singer-songwriter? And when I was doing my research, I couldn't find, where are you originally from?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question. I'm Israeli and Canadian. So I was born in England for, just circumstances. My father's Israeli. My mother is Jewish Canadian, born in Saskatchewan, raised in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And we lived we moved back and forth between the two countries. So really, when people ask me what my hometown is, it's very hard for me to answer that. It never felt like Calgary. I mean, Jerusalem just has more significance and weight to it. So, but yeah, I don't know where I'm from. And then it just really suited never knowing how to answer that to become this nomadic entity, because that makes way more sense to me than belonging to a place.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you're living this nomadic lifestyle, performing everywhere, and it's amazing that you did it for 10 years and literally toured the world, and then the pandemic hits and you're in Winnipeg. Talk me through that. I know you stayed in your host's basement for a couple of months. What did you do after that? And how did you make your way?
It was, and for all, I could have gotten stuck in Berlin or in Paris or in Montreal, but no, it was Winnipeg. And, I had probably a week where I could have thought really quickly about another place to go. Because I had so many options, I froze. I just didn't know what to decide. And I thought, I have no backstory here. I have absolutely no past in Winnipeg. I have no demons. I have nothing. So maybe this will be a very interesting story chapter in my life. And I like making a good story with my life. So I thought I'll stay. Amazing hospitality, given that these people never met me before, and what they met was an incredibly distraught woman. My entire life disappeared overnight. Yeah. Other musicians were stranded from their shows, but they had a home base or families or pets, or I had I went from having the best thing in the world to nothing. So they took me in, the Maddies, and I stayed with them for 2 months. Through them, I met a few people. I got an invitation to rent a room in another woman's house in exchange for helping her with her dog and her kid. And then I thought, I need some solitude. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to be in people's houses when I'm happily on tour, but I'm a wreck. Yeah. I am a shipwreck, and I need some privacy to figure out how to express all the feelings I'm feeling. So I decided I would look for an Airbnb for a month. And I didn't want to rent an apartment because I didn't want to commit to a lease. And then if I was able to go free again, then I'd be stuck. So I had this absolutely do not get trapped in Winnipeg mentality. But the Airbnb turned into a sublet that I could rent month to month. So I did have an apartment to myself, which was a very helpful, interesting year. A year I was in that apartment. Then that ended and I rented a room at a friend's house, and then I moved to another friend's house. So I have found a way, by the grace of very good people, to keep my overhead very low, have a place that's safe, and I can get my work done and I can come and go, which is critical to me.
So why did you finally decide Winnipeg is where you're going to call home?
I mean, that's a good question. Partly it was just very technical stuff. I needed to learn how to drive. I had never learned how to drive. The pandemic kind of made me go, this is a skill you need now, and you need to belong to the province to get your license and all that. So I thought, okay, let me just get the paperwork done, make myself a resident. I should have a doctor. So it was like very boring administrative things.
Yeah.
But also, I did sense that there was some magic to the city. And now that I have the freedom to leave and I'm coming back by choice every time, it's like coming with a new set of lenses, because now I'm coming back out of love and not out of desperation. And and I keep finding, oh man, I've made a wide variety of very special friendships here, creative collaborations. I'm in no rush to leave. I just don't like being in one place for too long. So that I can come and go, and my life, whoever's governing it from above, is allowing me to be a full-time artist still and have a kind of home base. I say for incredibly unlucky circumstances, I'm probably the luckiest person. I feel very, very fortunate for how things ended up.
Mm-hmm. So you've never been to Winnipeg before. How did you connect with the Jewish community here? Was it through friends? And I have to ask, what was your overall impression? What was your initial impression of the Jewish community here in Winnipeg?
That's a funny thing, because there are quite a few Jewish people who, when they're in a new city, that's sort of the first thing they look for out of some, I think, DNA. Like your safe space is the Jewish community. I do not have that mentality at all. And I'm much more passive, because even though I'm a performer, I'm an introvert. So I'm much more passive about reaching out to people. And so it's whoever finds me, really. And what happened is I played an outdoor show, with whatever restrictions, whatever was allowed during the pandemic. And there was someone in the audience who was from the Jewish community, liked the show, and also mentioned to other people who, do programming and stuff at the Rady Center, saying, hey, there's an Israeli artist here. I have an Israeli name, so it's like, it's recognizably Israeli if you know. So really, they found me, and I acquiesced because, of course, why not? Yeah.
Absolutely. When it comes to your own songwriting, how much of your Jewish identity plays a role? I know you've got an album called Songs from My Father, in which you sing in Hebrew, and we're all products of our environment, but is that something that's always with you?
It's been an evolution in terms of my awareness of that, because it was not, and it's been a very interesting trajectory. When I moved to, I don't even know how to begin to tell it, because it's gone through so many iterations in my own self-awareness. I know deeply and unchangeably that living in a war zone made me respond to protest songs from the Western world in a very intense way. Right. So when I first heard Dylan and the songs from Woodstock, my peers were like, the 60s are over, Orit. And I was like, no, they're not. There's war everywhere.
Well, there was that famous incident where Leonard Cohen went over during, I think, the war in the 70s and hung out with some of the IDF forces.
And just, it's in every cell in my body to be anti-war. Israeli music has a lot of poignant and tragic anti-war songs. So I think that made me very responsive to the reasons I wanted to pick up guitar in the first place. But in my songwriting, and especially when I moved to Montreal, where my career, kind of more officially, my first album and all that stuff started, I was so traumatized from the violence that I'd lived through that I wanted nothing to do with it. I wished my name wasn't Orit Shimoni. I didn't even use my name for my first few albums. I wanted to fit into the Canadian music scene, and I wanted to write the types of songs I loved, which were Americana, which were, country, which were nothing to do with my Jewish identity. What I discovered over years and years of doing this is that you cannot escape it. You could not, even if you escape it consciously, it seeps into my love of language is Jewish. My desire for tikkun olam, to make the world better through art, is Jewish. I think I'm in this constant you know, when people like find out they have ADHD and then suddenly everything is like, oh, that's a symptom. I kind of like that with my Judaism. It's like, oh, that's a Jewish thing. So it's an awareness and process all the time. It is literally in everything I do, I think, but not necessarily consciously. Yeah.
Since you've been in Winnipeg, you've done some really amazing work. One of the things I was reading about is the Singing Songs of Our Elders project. Can you talk about that and your work with Grey Academy?
Yes, that was an incredible opportunity. During the lockdowns, I was invited to do a project called Stories to Song, not a Jewish project, inclusive and sort of all welcome project, where they matched songwriters with senior citizens. And we were to interview them over a few sessions and then turn what they told us into a song for them. And it was a transformative experience, truly an incredible thing to use the skill that I'd honed for many years and then like use it to give someone else their voice. I fell in love with the process and I thought, how do I do way more of this? Especially when I'm not back on the road yet. And I turned to the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba, which gives special project grants, and they helped fund a project. So for their funding, it has to somehow benefit the Jewish community, and which was wonderful to do. And I thought, well, there's Jewish seniors here. Seniors in general have less of a voice often, not always, but often. And the more I thought about it when I was sort of conceptualizing how I would go about it was I got to do this amazing thing and witness what these people had to say. Wouldn't it be even more amazing if someone even younger than me was present for it? Because how often do teenagers hang out with seniors other than their grandparents, if they're lucky to have grandparents? And so I thought, I'm going to recruit youth to take part in the interviews. And then I thought, Orit, one thing I don't love and one thing I particularly strive for in all of my work is not to be insular in a cultural way. The great fortune of being an artist is that it can reach out to all communities, and that's really, really important to me. And I thought, well, this is, if you have a Jewish youth interviewing a Jewish senior and then presenting it back to the Jewish community, that remains insular. What if we brought in two teenagers, and one would be from outside the Jewish community, and then they could meet and interact and learn and grow and share? And so that's what I ended up doing. 2 teenagers per interview.
Oh, beautiful.
And then they also got to come back when I presented the song, and so they got to hear a song born out of an interview that they were present for. And so I was hoping that they would kind of see, look what art can do. Look what it can encapsulate. Look how it can move a person. And then we got to present the whole shebang to the community at the end of all the interviews. And it was just this joyful thing. I'm so fortunate.
Yeah, it's beautiful. One of the other things that you've done is you performed for a group of Holocaust survivors at the Gwen Sector Center a while ago. What was that like for you? And did it drive home the importance of this day and commemorating it?
I remember wondering in advance of that performance, what kind of selection I should do, what songs should I do, should I be broaching the subject directly, should I mean everyone there has trauma, should I be not addressing it and making it a lighter, fluffier set? And so I remember it just generated a lot of questions of concern. And then I just remembered music. You know, I forget sometimes that I'm also a musician because I'm so language heavy. But I'm singing and playing an instrument. It is transformative. It is healing. It is good for everybody. So it was just poignant. You know, it was poignant. It was. I love my audiences. I can genuinely say that. It doesn't matter who they are. I play on the train. I love my audiences. But this group, it was just a different level of awareness while I was performing, that these people survived something that even if I have read about it my whole life, have listened to testimonies. I will never, ever be able to wrap my head around what they've seen. And to have their warm reactions and welcome to me just meant that much more. It was quite a profound experience.
Yeah. I have to say, the rise of anti-Semitism lately is disturbing. I had coffee with a friend of mine from high school who I hadn't seen in many years. She's Jewish, and we were talking about she's got a son who goes to McGill and the rest of it. Do you think, as we get further and further away from World War II, people are becoming more and more ignorant as to not only the Holocaust itself, but the events that led up to it?
Yeah. It's a very painful thing to watch unfold, and to see that the learning from it didn't stick. You know, I don't know. I don't have a clear answer for it, because it's one thing to say, oh, the generation that got educated less is at fault here. Something has gone wrong with the education, for sure. There's been a distortion. It's terrifying to see, the conspiracy theories go back to what they used to. I mean, this is like medieval level anti-Semitism.
It's reminiscent of what happened in the 30s. It's as scary as it gets, I think, and I think there isn't a Jewish person in the planet who isn't very reactive to that, because it's in our DNA to have this vigilance, and it's justified, of course, to be super vigilant, because we know what can happen, and it's not an overreaction. We saw what happens. By the same token, I think it's very important, and I've seen it certainly in the last year unfold so much. We need to have the right to say that publicly, and when we do, it often gets immediately attacked. You don't care about other people. We should have a lot of space to just mourn our own specific mourning. Unfortunately, we live in a larger world, and I do think that there needs to be a level of awareness in our conversations that are public, because when I get together with other Jewish people, there's a common language of trauma, and we air it, and we air our experiences with anti-Semitism. But I think it's really critical in larger settings to acknowledge the awareness that we are not the only targeted group, because when we fail to do that, I think it sort of gives them fuel for their fire. And I keep watching it happen and going, oy, we shouldn't have to qualify our grief. But the way the world is right now, it would help us if we did, I think, as a community. So that's something that, as an artist, I tried my internet arguments, of course, over the last year, but I think as an artist, it's just the best space to do that in, because you can really transcend. It leads great to my next question. As a musician and writer yourself, what role do you think that artists can play in those conversations about the Holocaust, while also celebrating the vitality and life, or chai, of the community? And my understanding is you actually have an album that's coming out about this, right?
It's not exactly an album, but I am in the thick of very, very much addressing this question, and I have been for a few years now. It's been a work and a concept that I've been growing and developing for a very long time. I want to find the root of the question again. So I really, as a segue from what I just said, and you said two very important things: to commemorate, but also to celebrate the vitality. And I think those two are very, very critical things to put together. If we only talk about ourselves vis-a-vis our traumas, then we're not showing who we are as full people. And when we don't show who we are as full people, the loss of us isn't as appreciated. So I think that I always have that double vision. Sing about what happened, but make sure you're also like, I would say 95% of my songs have nothing to do with this. I'm a person well beyond my Jewish identity. So it's how to showcase both sides. When it comes to working directly about this, I've been working on a project that I called From Inheritance to Transcendence. And it started with a songwriting exercise that the very crux of it was that I'm going to write songs that are specifically informed by the inherited trauma of the Holocaust. But I'm going to write them in a way where I don't mention the Holocaust specifically. And I'm going to use the imagery that is authentic to my inheritance of trauma, but that I know is directly relatable to other communities who've experienced, persecution and cultural violence. In order to do that work, I even read memoirs from other regimes, of totalitarian violent regimes, to find the imagery that overlapped. And it was sadly very affirming of my suspicion that, people's loss of freedom is experienced the same no matter what culture you're from.
Right.
And so I'm going to continue to develop this work, looking for the best platform to perform it, the spaces or the style of performance that goes with it. But I have a good, 20 to 30 songs that deal very, very specifically with this subject as a way to honor that in myself, honor what I carry, but in a way that is specifically reaching beyond the confines of just my culture, so that it's not an insular conversation.
Wonderful. All right, this has been so amazing to have you here. So great to meet you, and so glad you've made Winnipeg home. I understand you have one more tune to play for us.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get you to set it up, and then I'll let you go to it. What are we going to hear?
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for talking about this on the radio and for having me here. It's been really an honor and a privilege to get to talk about this stuff.
My pleasure.
I'm going to sing a song. Sorry, I went off the microphone. I'm going to sing a song that's relatively new. It's not out on any album yet. And it's called Jerusalem Jane Sings the Blues. And it was a way for me to address the fact that, especially when the trauma is triggered and I'm not in Jerusalem, there's a loneliness that comes to that because no one around me understands what I'm going through, especially when violence surges again, that there's this sort of alienation that happens, that I'm trying to live in the world as a regular person, and yet I am Jerusalem Jane. So this is what this song is about. I don't think I need to say anything more than that. It is usually a piano song, so I'm trying it on guitar for the first time because I didn't realize you had a piano here. Let me tune quickly so it's palatable. I get by with my 2 working feet. They keep time while my heart keeps the beat. And I smile at the people I meet as I go about my day. But I wake up every morning with an ache that feels just like a warning. And I turn on the screens and I try myself to amuse, while Jerusalem Jane sings the blues. Sometimes it feels like a curse, but silencing her just feels worse. She's been singing mostly to herself, no need to rehearse, while she sings another verse You say, hey, let's go out tonight. There's a show at the bar every night. Put down that notebook and lay down that fight. Let's go dancing. And you dance to the music and raise a glass. And you talk of your weekends away. And you talk of your kids and your gardens and pets and the sports you used to play back in the day. And Jerusalem Jane sings the blues. I've been trying to tell you for years, but you've patted my head, called them fears. The whole world's an ocean that's made up of waves that are made up of our tears. And now they're flooding the news. And Jerusalem Jane sings the blues. And now that you're scared, you pretend that you've always cared. I've been trying to tell you all along in each song that I dared. And now that it's in plain view, you say, listen, listen, listen. Jerusalem Jane sings the blues, sings the blues, sings the blues, sings the blues.
Orit, that was amazing. Thanks so much for taking the time to stop by and talk to me today. This has been just a thrill.
Thank you so much for having me.